Bonjour et bienvenue à notre
Hello,
série sur le
and
bien-être des
welcome to our
vétérans
fall
et de leurs familles pour
2021
l'automne
series on the
2021.
well-being of our veterans
Je
and
m'appelle
their
Ramesh
families.
Zacharias, chef de la
My name
direction
is
et
Ramesh
directeur médical
Zacharias,
du Centre
CEO and Medical
d'excellence sur
Director
le douleur
of
chronique
the Chronic
pour les
Pain Center.
vétérans canadiens. Before I introduce our speakers for today, I would like to announce the 5 winners of our capacity building initiatives supporting master's and PhD research into veterans' chronic pain. Congratulations to Sarah DeGrace from Dalhousie University, Shanna Deschênes from Université de Québec à Chicoutimi, Julia Kelty from the University of New Brunswick, Hélène Lesseleur from Université d'Ottawa, and Meredith Seeger from the University of Manitoba. I would also like to acknowledge our research director, Dr. Jason Bussa, whose rapid recommendations on the use of cannabis for chronic pain was recently published in the Journal of Military, Veteran, and Family Health. The article is now posted on our website for those who wish to read it. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our presenters today. Our first presenter is Dr. Melanie Noel, an associate professor of clinical psychology at the University of Calgary. Following Dr. Noel, we have Dr. Helena and Jerris from Wounded Warriors. Thank you all for joining us today. Now I would like to present our moderator for this session, retired Lieutenant General Michel Maisonneuve.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Zacharias, et bonjour, chers amis. On behalf of the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence for Canadian Veterans, I welcome you to another in our series of webinars on veteran and family well-being. As you can see, there are 2 streams to choose from, a French language stream and an English language stream. We are doing simultaneous translation so we can serve both streams, and all the support material has been translated. You should also be aware that the presentations and slides are best seen in full screen mode. Les 2 présentations aujourd'hui sont en anglais, mais avec traduction simultanée.
The presentations today are in English, but with simultaneous interpretation.
It's my pleasure to work with the Center of Excellence on Chronic Pain, as I believe they are doing excellent work that's already helped many of our veterans who suffer from chronic pain, as well as their families. Over my 35 years in uniform, I've come to realize that chronic pain is a constant in the lives of many of our serving sailors, soldiers, and airmen and women. And for many of them, this pain follows them into retirement. So it's my honor to help moderate this seminar. Today, we will focus on the effect of veterans' chronic pain on families, in particular on children of veterans. Aujourd'hui, nous allons
En particulier sur les enfants des vétérans et des premiers intervenants. Today, we will focus on the effects of veterans' chronic pain on families.
We'll now have 2 presentations, and as usual, we will take questions after each presentation. I'd like to introduce our first presenter. Dr. Melanie Noel is an associate professor of clinical psychology at the University of Calgary and a full member of the Alberta Children's Hospital Research Institute and the Hotchkiss Brain Institute. She directs the Alberta Children's Pain Research Lab within the Vi Rydell Pain and Rehabilitation Center at the Alberta Children's Hospital. Dr. Noel's expertise is on children's memories for pain and co-occurring mental health issues and pediatric chronic pain. In particular, she's published guiding conceptual models of co-occurring PTSD and chronic pain. In recognition of her contributions to advancing knowledge on the psychological aspects of children's pain, Dr. Noel has received several early career awards and was named Avenue Magazine Calgary's Top 40 Under 40 of the class of 2017, and a Killam Emerging Research Leader in 2020. Dr. Noel is an advocate for the use of developmentally tailored psychological interventions for pediatric pain management, and she serves on committees to promote and implement evidence-based interventions within her children's hospital and beyond. Dr. Noel has co-authored clinical practice guidelines for pain and fear management for vaccine injections, and several of these recommendations have actually been adopted by the World Health Organization. She has broad clinical experience spanning both child clinical, mental health, and pediatric coping in the context of illness or injury psychology, and is fascinated by the role of parents and family in children's mental and physical health. Of great current interest is the impact on children when one of their parents has chronic pain, and on military families to see what differences exist compared to civilian families. Dr. Noel, à vous.
So hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be presenting today alongside some incredible colleagues from Wounded Warriors. I am going to be talking all about the intergenerational transmission of pain. And I'm going to be drawing from the chronic pain literature, but then segging into a really exciting study we're doing through the Center of Excellence that will examine this in veteran populations. So I am a clinical psychologist, and I am fascinated by the role of early life experience and early life pain on a developing human being. So my work has really shown that how pain is experienced even in the first few days of life really sets the stage for how pain is experienced later. So children develop, even babies can develop memories of pain, and these distressing, painful experiences really set the stage for how pain and healthcare is approached well into adulthood. But today I'm going to raise what I think is a compelling notion around how might the pain and trauma of your parent get under the skin to influence whether or not you as a child will have pain problems as you grow up. So this is what we call the intergenerational transmission of pain, and I'm going to be talking about that today. But first, I want to set the stage because many people don't realize what a huge public health problem chronic pain is in adolescence. So it's been coined a modern public health disaster. We know that in Canada, about 1 in 5 children, especially at the time of puberty and adolescence, will experience chronic pain lasting 3 months or more. And these are things like headaches, stomach aches, musculoskeletal pain, and it's often pain without an underlying injury or disease. This is a hugely costly problem, costing about $19 billion a year, and it can really rob children of a normal development. But what we're really learning in the last 10 years is what happens to these kids when they grow up. So we know that even if we do a good job of treating pain, up to 2/3 of kids will become adults with chronic pain. And even if pain resolves in childhood, these kids are at risk for developing mental health issues like PTSD, anxiety, and depression well into adulthood. And we looked at some nationally representative data out of the US several years ago and showed that chronic pain in adolescence is in and of itself a risk factor for the development of these psychopathologies into adulthood. So pain is more than just pain, right? There's a whole emotional mental health context to it. Now, I got really interested in PTSD because I'm a memory researcher. So I'm really interested in how these memories of pain and trauma develop. And it had been known for decades, particularly in veteran populations, that there is this tight co-occurrence between PTSD symptoms and chronic pain, but no one had really looked at this in kids. So we did a simple study where we compared about 100 kids who had chronic pain to about 100 kids who didn't have chronic pain and their parents, and we compared their PTSD symptoms. And you can see that the findings were striking. So we found that about 1/3 of kids with chronic pain had clinically elevated PTSD symptoms compared to 8% of kids who didn't have chronic pain. And their parents were reporting high levels of PTSD. So you can see here about 16% of parents of kids with chronic pain were meeting diagnostic criteria for PTSD compared to 0% of controls. And what was really fascinating to me was that when we asked them what their trauma was about, not very many of them reported it was their chronic pain problem or even a physically painful injury. You know, they were reporting things like someone dying, medical trauma, sexual abuse, things like that. And so that really, to me, raises a fascinating question as to, can early life trauma sort of increase risk for developing chronic pain later in life? Because certainly there's this really tight connection between trauma and pain. So we were the first to follow a group of kids with chronic pain over time and look at their PTSD symptoms and their pain and their disability. And you can see here that, not surprisingly, kids who come into a chronic pain program who have higher levels of disability, so pain is getting in the way of their life, their pain is getting worse over time. That makes sense. But even controlling for the levels of disability, children who have higher levels of PTSD symptoms, when they come into the program, their pain is getting worse over time. So there is this high co-occurrence between trauma and pain. And also PTSD is really driving a worsening of pain over time. And I will tell you, because I'm interested in parents, that parents of kids with chronic pain who have higher levels of trauma symptoms, their children have worse pain over time. So it's not just your own trauma, it's the trauma of your parent. So I'm also interested in other kinds of trauma and its connection to pain. So I got interested in adverse childhood experiences. These are 10 different types of events that could have happened to you before the age of 18. This includes physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, physical and emotional neglect, and 5 categories of household dysfunction, including a mental illness in the family, an incarcerated relative, observing your mom being treated violently, a substance abuse problem, and separation and divorce. So many people have ACEs, but it's been shown in a landmark study by Folletti and colleagues in the late 90s. They followed about 13,000 individuals who were evaluated at their primary care physician's office. So they had a medical evaluation. And then they called them and they asked them about their ACEs. And the findings were striking. They found that individuals that reported 4 or more ACEs had a 4 to 12-fold increased risk of alcoholism, drug abuse, depression, and suicidal attempts. They also had a 2 to 4-fold increase in smoking and sexually transmitted infections. So not surprisingly, more trauma, more mental health issues. But what was really striking, even more so to me, was that the more ACEs an individual had, the more childhood trauma, the more likely they were to have life-threatening physical illnesses like ischemic heart disease, cancer, lung disease, skeletal fractures, liver disease. So it really, really shows the power of how early life trauma can actually influence your physical and mental health. And since that time, in the last 20 years, there's been an explosion of research on ACEs, really showing a tight connection to trauma and the development of chronic pain. So we know that adverse childhood experiences increase our risk for death. They increase our risk for these issues. And that's both through, epigenetic changes, how trauma can change the brain and change what genes are turned on and off. But it's also, it affects, our behavior, and that can lead to mental and physical health problems as well. So we asked the kids about their own ACEs, and you can see here that, about a quarter of them were reporting that someone in the household had a mental illness. About 1 in 5 were saying their parents were separated or divorced. And you can see the rates of emotional abuse, physical violence, and physical abuse. So a minority, but still a pretty sizable minority. And not surprisingly, among these kids with chronic pain, kids who had higher numbers of ACEs, so about 3 is the cutoff here that we really start to see problems, they had worse mental health, so worse quality of life, higher major depressive disorder symptoms, higher levels of PTSD. So trauma and pain, not only connected in adults, which we've known for decades and decades, but our work is really showing that there's a tight connection between trauma and pain in children. And oftentimes, a lot of the parents, a lot of the adults we work with that have chronic pain, many of them can report that their pain came on in adolescence, right? So what about how trauma in your parent can influence whether or not you as a child may develop chronic pain? So this is a really exciting line of research that my lab is doing that I'm happy to connect with people about, because we actually have animal studies happening where we're looking at epigenetic changes, but due to time, I won't be talking about that today. So we know from systematic reviews, from countless studies now, that there is an intergenerational transmission of chronic pain from parents to offspring. And this has been shown in 59 articles, and this was several years ago. So there's been more studies that have come out already. We know that if our parents have pain, as a child, we're more likely to have pain and mental health issues. And I will tell you, when I moved to Calgary, I started asking parents about their own pain history. So I work with kids with chronic pain. We started giving their parents pain questionnaires. And we published a study showing that 50%, so half of the kids that we see at the Alberta Children's Hospital have a parent that has a pain problem. So there is a clear genetic link between pain in a parent and pain in a kid. But we're also interested in how early life trauma in a parent may increase risk for pain. So we know pain is connected across the generations, but is trauma. And so we asked parents of kids with chronic pain about their own childhood trauma histories and look at the percentages here. So you can see 37% reported that these parents said that when they were growing up, there was a family member who had a mental health issue. About a third had separation or divorce. And look at the rates of sexual abuse and emotional abuse among these parents. And I will tell you, in chronic pain clinics, when we do research with kids with chronic pain who are seen in the tertiary level children's hospital, that is a pretty high SES white homogeneous group, I will say. So the levels of trauma here are actually quite striking, and the rates of trauma here are actually higher than the original Folletti study, which raises the suggestion, can early life trauma in a parent confer risk for the onset of chronic pain in a child? So we looked at these parents and we asked them about their ACEs and their own pain. And not surprisingly, parents of kids with chronic pain that had higher levels of ACEs, they themselves were more likely to have chronic pain. They were more likely to have higher PTSD symptoms. But what was surprising was that we did not see evidence of a developmental cascade. So in this sample of kids who already have pain, if their parents had ACEs and chronic pain, that wasn't linked to a worsening of pain in the kid. So what this made us think is, maybe we're seeing some resilience here. So it is possible that early life trauma can lead to maybe the onset of chronic pain, but once chronic pain is developed, it's not causing a worsening of disability in these kids. And I think it's really important to think beyond the risk, beyond the doom and gloom of trauma and pain, and also think about resilience, which we know many of our families exhibit. I'm going to tell you about this study that looked at ACEs and physical and mental health in adults, but they were also interested in what they called positive childhood experiences. What are positive childhood experiences? There's 7 things that could have happened to you when you were a kid. These are the ability to talk with your family about feelings, feeling the experience that your family was supportive in difficult times, enjoying participating in community traditions, feeling a sense of belonging in high school, feeling supported by friends, having at least 2 non-parent adults who cared about you, and feeling safe and protected by an adult at home. So what they did is they followed thousands of adults. They looked at ACEs, they looked at their socio-emotional functioning and their depressive symptoms, but they also looked at positive childhood experiences. And the bottom line is, there was a link, as we've shown before, between early life trauma and worse mental health. But that risk was totally washed away depending on the number of positive childhood experiences that you had. And when you think about positive childhood experiences, they're really referring to social support, right? So social support is the antidote, even in the face of things like neglect and abuse and these household challenges. So one more thing I want to say before I seg into this exciting study that we're doing, and I want to tell you about in veteran populations, is that the power of social support has been demonstrated by a colleague of mine who looked at ACEs in a group of pregnant women and then looked at the development and the stress response of the baby. okay, months later after they were born. And they found that mothers who had higher levels of ACEs reported in pregnancy, their children, their babies had worse sort of a stress responsivity, but that relationship and that risk was washed away by social support. So I can't underestimate, and I'm so excited to see the presentation of our colleagues from Wounded Warriors, this sort of support, this sort of mental health support and social support that you wrap around, you know, families who are struggling or families in the face of risk are really, really powerful and really the antidote to all of this. So based on all of this research, we got really interested in veterans and serving military members because we know that chronic pain and mental health issues can be an issue for this population. And if we see pain in a parent and we see PTSD in a parent, based on this research that I just shared with you, there could be risk for pain in the child. But in fact, there's only been one study conducted to date, and this was out of Texas in the United States, looking at pain in children of veterans. And they found that the risk of headaches in these children tended to worsen over time, especially for younger children. So it's only one study. We need Canadian data. And importantly, I'm really interested not just in the connection between pain and mental health issues in a parent and pain in a child, but I'm also really interested in parenting and positive childhood experiences and resilience and this incredible resilience that we know we see in these families. So the aims of this study are really to characterize for the first time the prevalence of pain in Canadian veterans and their children. We're recruiting 250 veterans or serving military members. And all of this is done at one point in time from the comfort of your home on your phone, filling out these questionnaires to really get a sense of what is the prevalence and what are the relationships between resilience and pain in a parent and pain in a child. But what's become really clear is we need to gain a really richer understanding of the pain experience of children, how pain is expressed in families across the stages of a parent being serving in the military and then coming home. And so we're going to do 20 in-depth, really beautiful interviews with 20 veterans, 20 spouses, and 20 children to really have them, people with lived experience, tell us what is the unique context? What is the culture of pain in families? And so we're really, really excited about the impact of this work because really clearly pain in children, not only in veteran families, but just broadly in Canada right here, is under-recognized. And we know that by treating pain, by assessing it, by recognizing it, by treating it early in life, we can really offset not just pain problems in adulthood, but mental health issues. And there's even evidence that doing a better job of nipping pain in the bud in adolescence can actually reduce opioid misuse into adulthood. So we think that this could be really impactful research, and we're very excited to partner and to spread the word to really complete this and make an impact in the lives of these families. This research is in close partnership with people with lived experience, scientists. We have Tom Hoppy, we have Christine and Rob O'Connor and their daughter, Jessica Clemens. So we have veterans, their spouses, and their children, and they were instrumental in even the questions that we asked. And so I'm incredibly grateful to do this work in partnership with people with lived experience to really ensure that we're getting this right and that we're making an impact. We have hired a fabulous postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Sam Noyak, and this is in close collaboration with Dr. Jennifer Stinson at the Hospital for Sick Children, Dr. Gord Asmundson at the University of Regina, and then we're doing some parallel animal research studies looking at trauma and pain with our colleague Rochelle Machazik at Monash University. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to engaging with you offline and in the discussion.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Noel, pour cette présentation. Personally, I was fascinated by the fact that there is a clear genetic link between the pain felt by parents and that of their offspring. Also, that it's possible to build resilience in children through social support. And I know we'll discuss this in our next segment. The follow-up study you're undertaking with veterans and their children is very exciting and should yield useful results to improve the lives of our veterans and their kids. So before the session, we've had the audience submit questions in advance. So I'm going to ask Dr. Noel to respond to these over the next few minutes. The first one concerns how the pain gets passed genetically. So between parents and their children, does it get passed by nature or through nurture?
Excellent question. Thank you. And I don't want to give a canned psychologist response, which is always wishy-washy, but it's both. And it really is both. So we know from the literature that your biology plays a role, right? Like what you are influenced before you're born by the genetic code of your parents, right? Like that is true. And so there are clear genetic links, because if you're seeing 50% of kids, if you're seeing a 50 to 70% transmission, there's genetics involved, right? But what I love about the field of epigenetics is that it shows that it's not just your genetic, your DNA code. It's that the environment and what happens in your environment actually can turn on or off genes in that code, right? And so while that can be negative in the face of trauma, right? Because trauma can actually activate certain, and we've shown this in animal studies, turn on certain genes and create risk. We also know that social support can do the same thing and turn on other genes to foster resilience. So that's the biological part. The behavioral part, right? The nurture part is in how we parent. It's in our communities. I love that Helena and Jerris are social workers. I really believe in the power of the broader context, right? It's not just how you're parented, it's also around, did you have other adults in your life that cared about you? Did you have community traditions, culture? All of those things can really buffer against even the most intense traumas. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we need to think across the levels of analysis, from your biology, your brain, your genes, how the environment turns on and off your genes, your parenting, but then also community support, right? And that's what I love about what Wounded Warriors is doing, is really wrapping these families in support, and not just focusing on the parents, but also the children, getting children together. All of that is so powerful. And when I work with kids with trauma, right? And it's hard work, we work in the field of suffering. I always think it's a beautiful, hopeful message to say, wow, we can really turn the tide and foster resilience, just by how we wrap around support through parenting and broader influences.
So if a parent, in fact, has chronic pain, what can they do to help make sure their children don't remain at high risk?
It's a great question. We're actually doing some really cool work now, looking at a birth cohort, looking at parents with chronic pain and looking at how it develops in kids over time. What can you do? A parent is a powerful model, aren't they? I believe suffering can be a beautiful model, right? It's not whether or not you suffer, it's how you manage, how you approach the world through your suffering. I've had mental health issues among my family members, but what I saw is them accessing help. I saw them, seeking support when they needed it, and so I think that's a powerful message, not whether or not your parent suffers, which we know if you have chronic pain, you're suffering. It's how you cope with that, how you model resilience and sort of engaging in life despite challenges. So actually, Michelle, we, with a partner of mine, a collaborator, Katie Burney, we developed an intervention because what the problem is, and what Wounded Warriors is doing an amazing job with, is like targeting the family. That's so progressive. In the pain world, we focus on the kids, we focus on the adults separately. And what we really believe is we need some more of this kind of integrated family-centered care where you're working with kids, you're wrapping them, you're teaching them skills, but you're also working with their parents, right? Not separately, but together. Not that you can't do the separate work, but within families. That's how we're going to really address it. But again, you know, I'm a psychologist, and we learn about risk and psychopathology and doom and gloom, you know, all of that stuff. And I'm really pivoting to understand resilience in the face of adversity,
yeah,
which I think a lot of these families have. You know.
When you use this integrated approach, they probably learn from each other and can pass off messages and so forth.
Exactly, and it's so powerful. But again, there's so much more we need to do, and I think this is a great model. What we're going to hear about next.
But let's go back to your to the current study that you're putting together. How do veterans and their families? How can they get involved? We've only got about a minute here, Melanie.
Yep, I'll keep it short. It's very simple. Contact us. So we're on Twitter. We're on social media. You can get us, you know, online. Just contact us, and we'll do all the work. It's very simple. We will call you on the phone, get you into the study, and it's really pretty simple. It's just questionnaires on your phone. There's honoraria. We make it really easy for parents. So if people want to get involved, and we really hope they do, and we want to collaborate and partner, just contact us. We will also circulate the poster with our contact information. Contact us, and we'll do all the work, get you into the study, complete the questionnaires. And really, we want to have like pan-Canadian data to really advocate for these families and get, you know, what they need in place, but also send a message of resilience too. So please join us in this effort. We really believe it can have a big impact.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Noel. Et
merci donc important. Thank you very much, Dr. Noel. Thank you to our participants for their questions. The presentations will be available on the website of the Center for Excellence, and you can also send questions if you wish to.
With our second presentation. Thank you very much, Dr. Noel. Some of you may be aware of the existence of Wounded Warriors Canada, a charity with the mission to provide national mental health services. You also may not be aware that the team at Wounded Warriors offers a Warrior Kids Camp. This program is designed to help children and youth understand the impact that operational stress injuries have on their military or first responder parents. It helps them understand and helps them build resiliency. As far as we know, there's no other organization who offers this type of program for children and youth.
Aucune autre organisation qui offre ce type de programme pour les jeunes enfants. Our next two speakers, Dr.
Helena is a registered social worker and co-founder of Families First Support for Occupational Stress Incorporated, and director of the Warrior Kids program with Wounded Warriors Canada. She has practiced as a social worker for over 15 years with families of the Canadian Armed Forces. She specializes in developing resilience of young people within first responders and military families impacted by operational stress injuries. Helena completed her undergraduate degree in psychology at Concordia and a Bachelor of Social Work from the University of Calgary. She continued with the Faculty of Social Work for her master's degree and then her PhD. She was awarded the Wounded Warriors Canada Doctoral Scholarship. Dr. Horlick is now an instructor at the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Calgary and Grant MacEwan University School of Social Work. Ms. Jerris Popek, is the co-developer of the Warrior Kids program and also co-founder of Families First Support for Occupational Stress Injuries Incorporated. She works to advocate for valued specialized support services for families and children of Canada's military, veteran, and public safety personnel. With over 9 years of experience working directly with children and youth from the Canadian Armed Forces, Jerris values the opportunities to work alongside families that are affected by operational stress injuries. Her passion for working with children and supporting them with understanding this often challenging concept of invisible injuries led her to focus her current completion of a Master's of Clinical Social Work through the University of Calgary on furthering her understanding on current evidence-based research on the impact of the impact of trauma on military veterans, first responders, and all public safety personnel and their loved ones. Mesdames, à vous.
Hello, I'm Dr. Helena Horlick, and I am one of the program directors with the Wounded Warriors Canada Warrior Kids program. I'm here presenting with my counterpart, Jerris Popick, who is also another director of the Warrior Kids program. Today, we will be talking to you about a program called the Warrior Kids program, which includes two sections, a virtual and an in-person camp. The presentation today will cover the beginning need of identifying why we wanted to start the Warrior Kids program. We're going to highlight features of Warrior Kids, and then also touch lastly on some of the impact that we know has been had through the last few years of running the program. So to begin, the need of having Warrior Kids actually started back with my practice as a clinical social worker about 13 years ago with the Canadian Armed Forces base out of Edmonton. I was working with military families of the ill and injured, and I had families walking into my office asking for support for their children and youth on ways that they could talk to their children and support their kids after having a parent coming home after the Afghanistan-Iraq deployments with invisible injury, or what we refer to as an operational stress injury. Many of the families weren't sure how they could address this need. So this led for me to go into looking at what were the best practices and the evidence around supporting families with this. It turned out that we knew at the time that our research community focused a lot on the Vietnam veterans' families, and we knew that the impact on post-traumatic stress disorder from veterans seeped into family systems. Later on throughout my practice, we also identified the need for children with Canadian research that was done, and it showed the sort of critical consequences with children's own well-being when they were living with a parent with an operational stress injury. I further then looked at what was available for families, and we noticed that there were no programs actually aimed or geared towards supporting children that had a parent with an operational stress injury. Also, the programs that were offered to families, in my practice, we saw that they were being referred to programs in civilian community, and it was geared towards maybe more anger or specifically around anxiety, but it didn't truly capture the whole context of what was going on for those children and those youth. So combined with sort of looking at that picture, my practice, and looking at some of the evidence and the studies that had been going on at that time, also through my doctoral research, I realized how the culture of the military became very important in the treatment of PTSD for serving members and veterans. But it hadn't yet been like fully captured with adapting that into supporting youth and children. And it turns out that youth also who are living in military context take over the identity of that's often sort of associated with that strength, sacrifice, and service. And it was a really important sort of healing peer support aspect that needed to be also incorporated into the support programs that was being offered. The last barrier identified was the need for opening up programs that were not dependent on that service member on actually getting or connected to treatment capacity, that many families were limited on accessing services or specialized services if that service member or veteran was not actively seeking treatment. So we really identified that this was an important gap that we know in family systems, that families need support regardless. And it can go bi-directional, that if they're getting support, then that service member can also get support. So one of the important pieces of research that also came in understanding the concept around injury communication that actually came out of the Center of the Study of Traumatic Stress with Dr. Stephen Koza. And he really brought in the framework when we're talking about combat stress injuries, post-traumatic stress, the concept of injury communication, that in fact, children can understand complex injuries, such as invisible injuries of post-traumatic stress, if it's offered to them in realistic, developmentally, and age-appropriate ways. And that it was important for children and families to have an ongoing open communication around this type of injury to help support their own mental health and resiliency. The picture here is an example of a program that we will talk about in detail in a couple seconds. And this shows how a 9-year-old boy, after being provided information and discussion around operational stress injuries, is able to draw a picture of his understanding of an OSI, which shows his parent. The red part of the brain is the bad part of the brain, and the green part is the good part of the brain. And they're able to understand this important concept.
The Warrior Kids program is delivered in 2 formats, a 2-day in-person camp and a 6-week virtual program. The program is designed for children 8 to 16 years of age with a parent who is a veteran, military current serving, or a first responder impacted by an operational stress injury. The program uses a wraparound approach to not only provide services to the registered child or youth, but also provides a one-on-one intake and follow-up sessions to parents. The Warrior Kids program is designed using evidence-informed approach, which means the clinical framework pulls from resiliency theory, trauma-informed practices, and child-centered therapy. Next slide. Many programs have been designed to support child and youth mental health, but what makes this program so different? The Warrior Kids program is designed with every aspect to follow 3 main objectives. The first is the group format, which brings children and youth together to build peer connections. Participating in these programs, such as the Warrior Kids programs, is likely the very first time that a child or youth will have the opportunity to meet other youth with parents with an operational stress injury. This is a very powerful experience for many youth, as facing mental illness, particularly in the first responder and military communities, with PTSD can face increased social isolation due to the shame and stigma around the injury. The Warrior Kids program creates opportunity for youth that share similar experiences around the parental injury. For example, many children share stories about feeling confused when their dad gets mad for no reason, or sad when their mom can no longer attend their soccer games due to the parental injury. When youth share these similar experiences, this normalizes what they are going through and helps them to know that they are not alone. The second main objective of the program is to build knowledge around the operational stress injury using developmentally appropriate language and resource tools that we've created. Parents often say they do not know that their child has been affected by their behaviors or their injury, and they just don't know how to talk to their child. We use the terms visible and invisible injuries to help the children visualize and start to understand why a mental health injury, like an operational stress injury, can often be so confusing. It's because they can't see it, like a broken leg or arm. We introduce the importance of injury communication with parents during the intake session, and we build this psychoeducational lesson into formal sections of both the camp and the virtual programs. We also follow and enforce 3 main messages in the delivery around the operational stress injury. The first message is to let the children and youth know that the operational stress injury is not their fault. Often children feel their parents' behaviors or quick mood changes are their fault. The second message is It's not their responsibility to fix their parent. They get to just be a kid. This message is important because a lot of children, especially older youth, they start taking on caregiver burden when they notice that their parent is unwell. It's important to remind both children and parents that kids get to just be kids, and parents will focus on what they need for their injury to take that burden off their shoulders. Third is that their parent still loves them. As families progress on their journey with an injury or illness, many changes happen to what a parent can or can no longer do. However, this does not change how much they love their child. Kids at any age need to hear this, and they need to be reassured that with all the changes of the injury, that their parent still loves them and that still remains the same. The third and last objective of the program is building coping strategies to add to their child and youth mental health toolkit. Building our children's emotional intelligence is an area that's often left aside when talking and supporting children's mental health. The Warrior Kids program works to build and strengthen the emotional IQ of children and youth and provide them opportunities to try different coping strategies so that they can find out for themselves what works for them and what doesn't. By first teaching youth the importance of being an emotional scientist, which is being curious about our feelings all of the time and trying to figure out what makes us feel a certain way so that we can better understand what coping strategies we can use. We introduce custom yoga, for example, with a custom yoga deck. We try this out as a group, and this may be a tool that kids may find that they like. And for others, they may find this is not for them. Even trying to find that they don't like a specific tool is even a learning in itself. Knowing what we can use for coping is still just as important. Other coping strategies that we use in the program is painting to music. We use drawing, breathing, mindfulness, finding our inner coach, and visualization. One of the greatest aspects to children and youth being together in the Warrior Kids program is what they bring to the table. Hearing strategies amongst other youth and hearing what they do for themselves is often way more powerful than any adults in the room telling kids what to do.
The last part of our presentation is to focus on the impact, which has been narrowed down to some of the research that we've been doing in conjunction with running the program. The program right now is looking at not only the impact that has made in youth's lives by attending the program, but we're also looking at their ongoing understanding of the concept of understanding the operational stress injury in their lives. So 3 sort of preliminary findings that are important to sort of quickly touch on is that we found that youth were saying that they actually took on responsibility of their parents' injury and thinking that it was their fault. And through attending the program and hearing the messages around the idea that it's not their fault, it reinforced and sort of got them to stop and think about perhaps them taking on too much responsibility. They wanted informal ways to stay connected as peers, and this was a formalized way, and they wanted to stay connected, but in fact, more of an informal way to keep that peer connection. And lastly, the older youth explained that they wanted to have a deeper understanding of an operational stress injury, which leads us to know that perhaps we can go a bit further in finding ways to support their ongoing understanding of this very complex concept. We'd like to lastly show a video of a recent camp that was held just in October in Alberta that highlights features and some statements of impact from participants. Thank you very much.
I've been to camps before, but this was kind of different.
It's a lot of fun. We do a whole bunch of activities.
For them to have this is priceless.
Most important aspect is understanding the impact that operational stress injuries has on family members. So kind of first and foremost, like recognizing that children who have a parent that has been impacted by trauma, that they also have been impacted.
We are all here for a reason, the same reason, and we can all, really come together.
My parents are police, like they're constables and stuff like that. So of course, it's still going to affect them.
I myself have struggled with a OSI, and I felt that it was important for him to have some sort of education on it in kids' terms. I didn't know how to explain it to him myself, and it was really difficult for me to try and get across what I was going through personally.
So the idea is we've prepared the kids with the conversation, the communication, the language around kind of what's going on with mom or dad, and then they can take home this kind of gift of knowledge and this understanding, this empathy towards what their parent is going through, and open up opportunities for conversations to happen then further down. With the Dreamcatcher Animal Therapy Ranch, again, learning through the animals and learning through hands-on activities with the animals.
Some animals are extremely, extremely scared of you, and some animals are totally okay with you, which is totally normal. Like some people, they're extremely nervous. They'll back up if you go too close to them, and some people, they'll come closer.
That was a great highlight because I love animals. I connect with animals. They always warm the heart kind of thing and open up feelings that you never knew you had maybe. This camp was really, really good because you can open up and talk about how your lifestyle is at home with someone with an OSI. Kids can compare and they can be like, hey, yeah, I totally experienced that. You don't feel alone in the whole thing.
We want it to be fun. We want it to be relatable to both the young kids and relatable to the older teens. When they leave camp, they can also practice these concepts when they get home and in years to come.
It's a positive place to be, so if you're in a very bad place, I guess, mentally, they can help you out, and considering they're all counselors, you can always talk to them.
Since reading the book that they created and bringing him here, he's well informed and we can discuss it openly and he understands it, and it's not a stress of mine anymore.
It's been a lot easier to understand your feelings now, because before I was like, why are you crying? Why are you mad at me? Now I understand that it's all from their work.
Yeah, it can be pretty hard, and having a camp like this was really, really helpful.
They can take home this kind of gift of knowledge and this understanding, this empathy towards what their parent is going through, and open up opportunities for conversations to happen. Instead of it being really things that we don't talk about, we want it to be, now we do talk about this and we bring this into the conversation as a family.
Merci beaucoup, mesdames.
Thank you very much.
Comme vous pouvez le voir par les remarques des jeunes dans le vidéo,
as you can see, with the youth in this video, this program has a lot of potential to help
Noel brought up the importance of what she called social support during her presentation to deal with some of the intergenerational issues between parents and their children. These camps run by Wounded Warriors Canada are an excellent practical approach, and as you can see from the attitude of the youth in the video, these programs seem to be very helpful. I particularly appreciate the fact that these programs were requested and suggested by veterans themselves. So now we'll move on to your questions, and we're probably going to go a few minutes beyond the top of the hour because we fell behind a little bit. So we'll carry on for a few minutes more. So the first question is, how does a parent really know if their child needs this level of support? Perhaps, Helena, you could start and then pass it on to Jerris.
Sure. So the beautiful thing about the program is we sort of put it into the category of psychoeducational, and it really is aimed towards building that community of supports and providing the resilience that all children can use and benefit from. So we differentiate the difference between someone needing treatment and needing sort of the assessment around a mental health condition for children and treatment. And this program is really about providing them that power of knowledge and the skills around coping and strategy skills around that piece. So the one sort of requirement that we discussed, the one basic requirement of attending the program is ensuring that the child or the family and the parent understands that they have to recognize that they're impacted by an operational stress injury, and that is acknowledged within the family. But at what level, what language they're using, we've also adapted that every family is on this very unique journey, and it's such a complex thing to talk about that we are really allowing kind of families to kind of meet them where they're at in this program and supporting them in that journey.
Jerris,
I'm not sure if Jerris wants to add anything to that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's well done by Helena. I just think that the aspect of introducing an intervention to children that are at their level with their peers is such an important aspect, and that it's not done in the traditional office, where adults are typically doing their work. So I think that's an important aspect to incorporating into this particular program as well.
Okay, the other question, one of the other questions we got is, of course, concerns the whole stigma associated with operational stress injuries. And if a parent says, hey, listen, I don't make my injury public, will this be protected if my child attends the camp?
Right. And such a very important aspect to be aware of and to take consideration when choosing a family intervention. So like Melanie was talking about before, there's lots of programs out there that focus on just providing support to the parent and just providing support to the child. But such a unique factor when we're really trying to combine the supports, when you're bringing families together, and everyone might be at different levels, which is okay. The factor of a group intervention is the idea that it is not done in complete isolation. So we really want to make parents and families aware that when you are engaging your child in the Warrior Kids program, they are the whole beautiful part of the intervention piece is the fact that they're going to be with other peers that also have a parent with an OSI. If that's not the stage where the family is at, and that's just not what their comfort level is, then this is just not the right time for this particular intervention. And that's okay as well. Everyone is on their own journey, and it's really important to make sure that if that's not the right comfort level for that parent with the injury, it may come a little bit later, and that's just fine as well.
And is there a financial cost, Helena, to the program?
Well, the amazing part about the program is it does reduce a very important barrier that families have in accessing a program that's specialized towards their needs for mental health. And the reduced barrier is that the program is at no cost for families. So the camp that we run in person would be the only cost sort of linked for families that they might have as if the camp is at a location that requires them to travel, and due to the being on the weekend, if they need to kind of stay overnight somewhere, the travel costs would be something families would have to cover. Other than that, there is no cost to attend both of our virtual program and our camp program. And that is in the great support of Wounded Warriors Canada as well, obviously, for this to happen.
So, you know, we encourage everyone to give, to donate to Wounded Warriors, in fact, for that reason.
Yes.
Is there a specific age range when where children are at a higher risk than others?
Yeah, so what sort of the research has guided us in basically telling you that there's no easy answer. So depending on with the young age children, it could be considered sort of more of a high risk category for younger children, because if you're looking at their coping skills or their ability to have developed coping strategies to deal with high levels of stress within their lives, they may be considered at higher risk because they just don't have those skills yet. But on the other hand, when we look at older age children, so adolescence age, you could consider, research has pointed to some higher risk for adolescents because although they do have additional coping strategies that they've already had time to put into place and even their cognitive processing and understanding that the complexity around the injury is better developed. But they're also then have additional challenges in their life due to developmentally what they have to go through as an adolescent that adds additional stress. So potentially, you know, the idea that they might have a lot more stress happening in their lives at that particular, just due to their developmental stage. So depending on sort of where you look at kind of ages and stages with children, we wouldn't necessarily say that one age is at most risk, you know, kind of two ways to support kids, I guess.
Jerris, is it difficult to convince the children to attend the camps?
Well, you know what? I'm going to piggyback onto Helena's answer. It depends on the age of the child. So all parents out there that have 16-year-old or 15-year-olds are, you know, our camp where you're in person, you're coming out to the country and you've got like, you know, that camp feeling. I think it's definitely a lot easier to, you know, convince the kids to come out to that and experience that with all the fun activities. The virtual camp, sometimes, you know, there's a bit of fatigue going on right now with doing things online. So there is a little bit, but we have found the magic solution to that, which is the warrior kits. They get sent in the mail to the participants. They arrive at their doorstep with the kids' names on it. And when they open up the kits, they get all the weekly activities are in there, as well as probably large amounts of candy. So this is not research-based. This is not evidence-based.
So you're actually marketing. Good for you.
It works, and we've had, you know, a great turnout, and we're just in the middle of running our virtual group right now, and 100% our participants are coming back each week. So especially for teens, you know, you get them there and we do the rest. We build that relationship and they build relationships with their peers, and they're really enjoying each and every kind of second of the program.
Super. So to close off, where can we find more information about this and where can we learn more about the programs and sign up, etc.?
Right. Well, easy answer for that. You can head to woundedwarriors.ca. So the website is a vast array of all of the programs, including their adult programs, their couples programs, and our family programs. That includes both the virtual Warrior Kids program and the camp registration as well.
Super. Look, thank you very much. This is all the time we have, unfortunately, but thank you to all three you ladies for your presentations, for your answers to the questions, and also for your research, which shows that there's actually hope for improving the lives of veterans from suffering from chronic pain and the lives of their families as well. The Chronic Pain Center of Excellence for Canadian Veterans will continue to perform research on the best ways to treat chronic pain. We want to bring hope to all those suffering and to their families. And we'll continue to emphasize interdisciplinary services for chronic pain management. And as you know, the center is also creating a network of pain clinics across Canada where we encourage shared dialogue between the veterans and those who are providing them pain services. As it was evident in this seminar, veterans and their families can get help across Canada, and there are indeed resources available. I remind our viewers that a recording of this and all our sessions is available on our website, and any question you might have can also be asked through our site. Please don't hesitate to contact us for any information you may require. We're going to hold another session in this series next week on Wednesday, the 1st of December at noon Eastern Standard Time, and it will discuss military culture and the identity of military members. You'll get to see a fascinating aspect of service in uniform and its impact on your life and your behavior. We hope you'll join us then. On behalf of the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence, thank you for your presence. Merci beaucoup à tous et à la prochaine.